Okay. No. Okay. Okay, so for anyone who's listening at home, you probably can only see the side of me, but it's my good side. And if anyone is watching at home, if you could text me, if you see Monica, then we can have her move several more times. It's a big issue. Chas v'shalom. All right. All right. Monica, you good? All right. All right. Want to make sure everyone's comfortable. Okay. So, hopefully you can hear me at home. There are a few people who couldn't make it. They're watching at home. Okay. So, now, Jews, we don't do that. Now, of all of the Muslim countries, they have not one of them a democracy, which means to say that not one of them has a free press. And all of them have to look like they hate Israel, because if they don't, then their populations will get mad at them for not supporting the Arabs over the Jews. Now, why do Muslims in other countries care so much about the Palestinians? This is a key point. They don't. They don't care about them at all. However, there is something that they do care about, and they do care about their religion. And there's a mitzvah in the Quran, which is that if a land is ever controlled, and this is why it's so hard to make peace, and you can never make peace with jihadists. I know there's a lot of reasons you can't make peace with jihadists, but this is one of the biggest problems. You know, the jihadists, they don't have any problem with France. They don't have any problem with England. They have a huge problem with Spain. What's the difference between Spain and France if you're a jihadist? I mean, eventually they want to control the whole world and convert everyone to Islam or kill everyone. The jihadists, not all Muslims, but the jihadists. But what's their problem with Spain? So there's a rule in Islam, it's like one of their mitzvahs, that says once any land is controlled by Muslims, then that land has to stay Muslim controlled forever. And because the Muslims were once in control of Spain, they believe that that land needs to be returned to Muslim control. Once it's theirs, it's always theirs, and they feel that way about the land of Israel too. So the fact that there are Jews, the cursed Jews, controlling land that is really supposed to be controlled by the Muslims according to their Quran drives them crazy. It drives them nuts. Now, some of them don't care. The UAE, they don't care. Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, they have enough problems. They know they're never going to get the land back from Israel. They've given up on it. But there are some countries, even Saudi Arabia, has come to the point that says, you know what, I know it's a mitzvah, but they're there, what are you going to do? The same way they've given up on Spain. But if you listen to the really radical jihadists who say we need to take back Israel, they always add in, oh, and Spain. They're not going to take back Spain. They're sure as hell not going to take back Israel. But they think that that's what they need to do. Even more so Israel, because Israel's their third holiest site, because they believe, which is very doubtful, but they believe that Muhammad went to heaven from Jerusalem, even though Jerusalem's not even mentioned one time in the Quran. It just says somewhere in the east. He flew there that night on a horse, if you believe in that kind of thing, which unfortunately they do. So that's one of the reasons why international Muslim hatred of Jews has taken off over the last 120 years. If you think about before 1880, Muslims didn't care about Jews. They didn't care. They didn't like them, but they don't like anybody. They looked at Jews the same way they looked at Christians. The anti-Semitism from the Muslim world that we hate Jews only started when the Jews started coming to Israel, or to Palestine until 1948, then to Israel. That is when, and then they started adopting a lot of the tropes of anti-Semitism that they learned from the Christians in Europe. You know, the money and all the ridiculous things that they stole. But if you looked in Arab newspapers before 1840, there's nothing about Jews. They don't, in fact, Jews were living in Arab countries, and most of them, you know, it's not that they were doing so great. They were still, you know, lower class because they weren't Muslim, but they weren't particularly persecuted worse than anyone else until the Jews started going back to Israel. Now, almost all of the Arabs in the world grew up in countries where there's no free press, where there's no free system of education, where the textbooks and the news and the newspapers that they've read their whole lives just tell them how horrible Israel is, how Israel drinks the blood of Palestinian babies, and all that stuff that you've been hearing forever. That's what they grow up with. And so most of them who end up moving to France or to Britain or whatever are very, very, very anti-Semitic. And some of them are radical, and some of them attack synagogues, and some of them beat up Jews, and some of them look to shoot Jews, and some of them do these kinds of crazy things. So that's what's happened in Europe and around the world. But let's just take a second to focus on what's going on here. And my daughter's a senior. She's going to go to college next year somewhere. You know, these are like, have become ground zero for anti-Israel bashing and so forth. Why? So now we have to go back to the mid-90s and look at what happened. So from the mid-90s, once Israel built the wall around the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, now the Palestinians really can't use terror in the same way that they were during the Intifada. And even if they started in another Intifada, they wouldn't be as successful because Israel's protected itself with these barriers, and Israel's given Gaza back. So instead of, the West Bank has become pretty much unable to produce terror the way it did in the good old days of Yasser Arafat. Gaza went to a different strategy. They said, okay, if we can't go through, we'll go over. Then they started sending rockets and sending rockets and sending rockets. What happened to that? It was horrible. And Israelis were dying all the time, and people who lived in Sderot were living in bunkers 80% of the time. But then Israel invented Iron Dome. And Israel said, you can't go through, and now you can't get over. And so when I went to bed October 6th, when I went to bed that night, and I looked at my phone and I saw that rockets were coming over from Gaza, I said, big deal. They do that all the time. Iron Dome will take them out. It'll be fine. Then I woke up and I saw the first headline, 100 people kidnapped. I said, what? Well, this was something totally different. So where did we get to? We got to the point where they couldn't attack from the West Bank because the wall that is, I mean, they still attack once in a while, but not the way they used to. Israel built the wall. Israel built the wall around Gaza. Israel pulled out of Gaza. They went to the rockets. We went to Iron Dome. Palestinians had nothing left. We had one thing left. And that is diplomacy. So what does that mean? It means that over the last 25 years, or since the mid-28 years, since the mid-1990s, they have been working on a campaign to delegitimize Israel. It started off as what's called BDS, Boycott, Divest, and Sanction. The Boycott, Divest, and Sanction movement didn't hurt Israel's economy one iota. In fact, Israel's economy has been booming and booming and booming. And if you go there, this is like the most beautiful country in the world. It's fabulous. People are making a fortune. There's tons of billionaires. They're on the NASDAQ. I mean, there's plenty of problems in society. There's poor people just like there's poor people here. But for the most part, Israel's economy was doing unbelievably well. Until, recently the stuff with the judicial stuff, and that started to hurt the economy and for different reasons. But in general, the economy is doing great. Israel's like, Warren Buffett invests there more than anybody. If you drive by Herzliya, you see Microsoft and Apple and Intel, and they're all there because Israel has this great brain power. But the boycott, divestment, sanction, it nurtured your kids' generation. And they grew up, and here's what they've been doing over the years is two things. One is what we call intersectionality. Intersectionality is they have invested a great deal of time with other minorities. And they've gone to just take for example, the LGBT community. This is the most astonishing. I mean, this is just like the most, but this is where you see how successful they've been and how just absurd, what lunacy this is. The LGBT groups, not all of them, but some of them, are coming out for Palestine. It's illegal to be gay in Palestine. It's illegal. And the punishment is the death penalty. If they find out you're gay in the Gaza Strip or the West Bank, they take you to the tallest building they can find and throw you off so that you die. That is fact. That's fact.
And a lot of those other countries too.
Yeah, of course. Have you ever been to the gay pride parade of Gaza City? They kill you. Meanwhile, Tel Aviv is the gay capital of the Middle East. The gay pride parade in Tel Aviv is the largest in the world. And they celebrate it. They don't celebrate so much in Jerusalem, but they do have a gay pride parade in Jerusalem, and it's significant. The Orthodox are not big fans, but they don't throw people off of buildings for being gay. The worst thing they'll do is, spray paint on a bridge the verse that says you're not allowed to do that in the Torah, which is really annoying. They're a real problem. But don't throw people off of buildings. So here you have gay people marching in New York, marching in San Francisco, we're for Palestine. That is literally the same thing as Jews in the 30s in this country marching for Nazis. We're for Hitler. What? That's what's happened. They've been convinced that Israel is the right-wing bad guy. One of the things you see, especially that Netanyahu is prime minister, is people complain about the far right-wing policies of Netanyahu. So a good question for someone who says, what are the far right-wing policies of Netanyahu? Do you know if Netanyahu were an Israeli politician, he would be, other than on Israel, he would be pretty similar to Bernie Sanders. He's pro-socialized medicine. Think of it, pro-socialized medicine, pro-automatic draft to the army. Everyone has to serve in the army. Pro-free college. What's radical right-wing about that? The only thing he insists on is, I don't want another Holocaust, so I need to protect the Jews. He's right-wing on never again. But you know what? There are a lot of people now they're not that right-wing on never again. That's called anti-Semitism. So the other thing you say, well, Netanyahu is a warmonger. Really? He actually continues to be elected because he continues to keep Israel out of wars. He's actually the opposite of a warmonger. He's kept Israel out of war after war after war. And the knock on Netanyahu is he doesn't go far enough in taking out Gaza. This is the first time he's ever tried to destroy Hamas. He always backs up. So when people call him a right-wing, warmonger, it's not anywhere near the truth. He's right-wing in Israel on security. But the truth is, in Israel, there's no such thing as the left wing anymore. It doesn't exist because the Palestinians have been so outrageous in their demands and unwilling to have peace that there is no right. In fact, a new poll just came out yesterday of Israeli leadership. The Labor Party was the party that always dominated Israel. Who was from Labor? David Ben-Gurion, Golda Meir, Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres. Labor was the party. If there was an election held today, Labor wouldn't get one seat in the Knesset. They'd be at 0. They don't even exist anymore. So Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett, who are like moderate, they're left of Netanyahu. They're the same as Netanyahu. They have the same policies. Now, on the judicial stuff, that's a crazy nonsense. And on some of the religious stuff, Netanyahu caters to the religious because he needs their votes. But Netanyahu's not religious. In fact, some people have said he's an atheist. He doesn't wear a yarmulke. I doubt he keeps kosher in private. He doesn't care about that. In public, he's a Lubavitcher. But, behind the scenes, he's not. So what's so right-wing about him? Why does everyone say that? He's not right-wing at all. Okay. What has happened, and this is to understand what's going on college campuses, is that 25 years of this intersectionality and wearing down the left and catering to the left of the Palestinians has convinced the left, the really radical left, and the Muslim community of America, that just like we grew up with apartheid and everyone in America knew that the blacks were the good guys and the Afrikaners were the bad guys, and everyone just accepted that as fact, and we all hate the Afrikaners who are treating the blacks terribly, and we all pull for Mandela, and we all saw Lethal Weapon 2 before we knew Mel Gibson was an anti-Semite. And we rooted for, the blacks, and we all watched. That's how these college kids feel today about Israel and the Palestinians. They've been convinced that what's going on in Israel is the same as apartheid happened in South Africa. Now, the truth is, it's apples and watermelon. There's nothing in common, not a shred of thing that's in common. In fact, if anything, it's the reverse. It couldn't be, but they're convinced of that. And so when you tell them that they're an anti-Semite, that's what that sounds like to them is you telling someone who's supported Mandela during apartheid against the whites that you're racist against whites. That's what that sounds like to them. It just sounds absurd. Of course I'm not racist against whites. I just don't like those whites because of what they're doing to the blacks. So these people say, of course I'm not anti-Semitic. I just don't like those Jews because of what they're doing to these Palestinians. That's what they've been convinced of because they've accepted the false narrative of the Palestinians, which is what they've been hearing all these times. Now, 2 more points on that. One point is, and this we talked about last month when we met, you have to understand that the Palestinians, as we said before 1967, they didn't exist as a people, but they had some representation because the world was changing. There was World War I, World War II, the Ottomans were there, then the British were there. Well, then who's going to be there? The British are going to leave. So the Palestinian leadership, which was no such thing, went to, well, who do you go to if you don't have leaders? Your religious leaders. So who is their religious leader? The main religious site is Jerusalem. Well, who's the religious leader of Jerusalem? The Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. So the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem said, well, the world's at war and there's 2 sides. One side likes Jews and one side doesn't like Jews. I'm going to team up with the side that doesn't like Jews because I also have a problem with these Jews. I don't want them here either. So, 1941, Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, goes to Berlin, has a meeting with Hitler, and at that meeting, if you don't believe me, you can Google it. I showed you the picture last month. They had a meeting, and they discussed killing all the Jews in Palestine. You look at that picture of Haj Amin al-Husseini and Hitler shaking hands in Berlin, 1941. What do you think they were talking about? A 2-state solution? How to get along peacefully with the Jews of Palestine? You think that's what Hitler was talking about? They were talking about how to kill all the Jews. That he's the George Washington of the Palestinian people. Haj Amin al-Husseini, who met with Hitler on how to destroy all the Jews. That basic constitution that he created, that idea of what the Palestinian people are in 1941 when he met with Hitler, has never changed. The PLO hasn't changed their charter about wanting to get rid of all the Jews. Hamas hasn't changed their charter about wanting to kill all of the Jews. This is who they are. The Palestinian narrative that has been sold to kids on our college campuses is based on a Nazi ideology of getting rid of all the Jews. So you might say, well, I don't believe that. When you hear them at Tulane, at Harvard, at Penn saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, the river to the sea means the whole thing will be free of Jews, which is what the Nazis said, Judenrein. They're the last ones to say free of Jews. So what has happened is a neo-Nazi's dream, not on the right, on the left. Because what's happened on the left is they have convinced the left-wing, woke, whatever you want to call them, that the Palestinian narrative, which is based on a Nazi ideology, is true, and that they're the underdog. Now, what's doubly painful for probably a lot of you is all those people on the left, when they were being persecuted for being gay, we stood with them. When they were persecuted for being black, we stood with them. When they were persecuted for anything, we stood with them. When we're persecuted, not only do they not stand with us, they stand against us. So that's what's going on right now. Now, I don't think, in fact, I think there's more reasons to be optimistic than pessimistic when this war is over. I'll tell you for 3 reasons. One is, maybe 4 reasons. One is that we've never seen Jewish unity like we have now. 2 is Israel's going to win this war, and it's going to win it decidedly to the point where Hamas won't exist anymore. And they will think very hard about ever doing something like this again. And Israel will shore up its defenses so that something like this never happens again. 3, the support that the Biden administration has given Israel I mean, they attacked Syria last night, which was fabulous, an Iranian militia in Syria. And the more the Iranians attack America, the more America will pound them, the more it'll look better for Israel. But the way that the Congress has stood by, I mean, look, you're always going to have these squad, and they're disgusting, and they should be tried for treason, in my opinion. But the majority of Congress, including the new Speaker of the House, are emphatically pro-Israel. I've been on the phone with a lot of them. They've been great. They've done everything that we've wanted. 3, there will be a backlash against these woke students on the left on college campuses when this is over. There will be a crackdown, and it will be led by Congress to make sure that Jews can no longer feel unsafe on college campuses. That backlash is 100% coming, and I think Congress is going to help with that. If they don't, we can't do it. We need Congress to help.
Rabbi, what do you think of the fact that DeSantis already did it here?
It's fabulous.
Right?
It's fabulous.
Usually we don't agree with him on most things. so
Right.
that's-
It's fabulous. He's leading the way. And then the last thing I would say is, there's one other good thing. Well, let me end this way, and then I'll take. I could talk for a lot more time, but I'm sure you have questions. We've only really scratched the surface. But let's say this. And I mentioned this on Friday night, this past Friday night. You know, when Herzl started his Zionism in the 1880s, 1890s, really 1890s for Herzl, and he went to France and he saw the Dreyfus Affair, which we talked about last class, and he decided, you know, Herzl was very secular. But when he saw that Zionism was the answer, the Jews living in Israel was the answer, and the only way to protect the Jewish people, because France was like supposed to be the most, after the French Revolution, the most accepting democratic place. And we saw that even France was virulently anti-Semitic. He said we have to have our own home. But what he started doing after that as a secular Jew is he started keeping Shabbat. And the Zionism brought him back to his Judaism. So I'm going to talk about this tonight. I know you'll all be here for services tonight, to get your stickers, if nothing else. But you have to consider that last week's Torah portion, as the bulk of the war started, mentioned the word Hamas twice. Last week was Noah, the story of the flood. And the word that God uses to say, we need to destroy all of the world because of their behavior, the word that's used to talk about it is Hamas. That was last week's Torah portion. And that's why God destroyed the world, because of Hamas. So in this week's Torah portion, I mean, you can't even make this up.
What does Hamas mean in Arabic?
In Arabic, it's an acronym that means Army of God, jihadists kill the Jews, or something like that. The word, so that's the acronym. But the word also in Arabic means violence. In Arabic it means zeal. In Hebrew it means violence. But, they knew what they were picking. So that's the word that the Torah uses to describe why the world needed to be destroyed, because you can't have Hamas in your world, so God had to destroy everybody in the flood except for Noah and his family. That's last week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion, you cannot believe it. Have you ever heard the story where Abraham and Sarah went down to Egypt because there was a famine, and Pharaoh was going to take Sarah, so Abraham said, "Tell him you're my sister"? You ever heard that famous story? What happens in this week's Torah portion, Lech Lecha? Sarah gets taken as a hostage into Gaza. She's taken to Gerar. Gerar is Gaza. They were on their way down to Egypt. What's on the way down to Egypt? The Gaza Strip. Where did they stop and where did she get kidnapped? In Gerar, which is the western Negev. It's Gaza. In this week's Torah portion, Sarah gets taken hostage into Gaza. Now, God comes to Pharaoh, who took her hostage, and says, "How dare you? You better let her go right away. I'm going to bring plagues on you. You're not going to believe." And he gets so afraid that he sends her out. But what's going to happen later on? In a couple of Torah portions, Abraham, should get the blame for this, because he says, tell them you're my sister so they don't kill me. because I see they're going to take you hostage. So tell them you're my sister so things will go well with me. So we asked the question, well, why didn't Abraham do more to protect her? And the answer is, well, what could he do? He's one guy surrounded by the Egyptian army. What could he do? So the only thing he could do is say you're my sister and you'll go and I'll pray for you and hopefully God will save you. And that's what happened. But one generation later, Isaac is the story of Isaac. And there's a famine in the land, and Isaac is just like Abraham. With Rebekah, he's going to go down to Egypt because there's always food in Egypt because they have the Nile River. So they could always plant food. They had this huge river. So they're going to go down to Egypt and get food. And when he gets to the border, God said to him, you can't go. You, Isaac, stay in Israel. So you have to remember that Abraham never inherited the land of Israel. God came to Abraham and said, I'm not giving you the land of Israel. He said, your children will inherit the land of Israel. So who inherited the land of Israel? Isaac. So Abraham never had the protection of the borders of the land of Israel. And because of that, other nations were able to pick on him. But in Isaac's generation, there was a terrible famine and there was no food there. So Isaac said, we need to leave or we're going to starve to death. When he gets to the border, God says, you can't leave because you own the land. This is your land. You live after 1948. Abraham lived before 1948. You have the land to protect you. And so what happened? He didn't leave. And what happened? A miracle happened and the food started growing. So you have to understand that we live now in a post-1948 world. We'll never be evicted from the land of Israel. The land in and of itself protects us. And the Torah portion this week proves it, that the land is ours, and the land is enough to protect the Jewish people. So when this is over, we'll get what we got in last week's Torah portion. There's a verse in Isaiah. Isaiah predicted that after the first temple was destroyed, the Jews would go back and build the second temple, and he was right. He said it's going to happen in 70 years, and it happened. In chapter 40 of Isaiah, it says, Lo yishama od Hamas ba'artzecha. Never again shall Hamas be heard of in your land. It's in Isaiah chapter 40. And now that's what's going to happen too. Just like God said to Pharaoh, how dare you attack my people in the land of Israel? Now the Israeli army is going to say to Gaza, how dare you attack the Jewish people, and they're going to be destroyed. So I think a lot of good ultimately is going to come from this. Most certainly, though, these crazy woke college students, the colleges need to crack down and make sure that they can't make Jewish students unsafe, but they also need to realize this, and hopefully they'll understand this when the war's over, and we'll keep saying it to them until they do. There was a war in Israel, and the sides became very clear. There was Israel, America, France, Great Britain, Italy, Germany, Greece, the Netherlands, Spain. That was one side. Then there was Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. So you stand with them while you're preaching morality to us. That's what's happened. You're standing with North Korea, Iran, China, Russia, Hezbollah, and Hamas and preaching morality to us? I don't think so. So that's the point that needs to be drummed into their heads until they understand that they think they're so moral, but they're actually fighting against morality. And usually, like Martin Luther King says, the arc of justice bends towards morality. And we'll get there with this as well. Okay, so that's my presentation. I've got you can clap. It's fine. We got maybe 20 minutes left, so we can answer some questions. And then if you want to know what we're doing to help, I can tell you that too. Yes?
I just want to, we could talk for 1 minute more about, you started about Bibi, and I'm just interested in your
Started about what?
beat about Netanyahu, picking up on morality where you left off. I just want to know, were you making a point, like what's your, we're not going into a whole political discussion, but like, so not right-wing, or not as right-wing as we thought, but where do we put that right now?
Netanyahu? Well, look, Netanyahu, I think, in my opinion, he's going to take 70% of Israelis blame him for this. You know, someone was asleep at the wheel. Now, I don't know exactly what happened. But what happened after the Yom Kippur War was very interesting. So Golda Meir was in the same position that Bibi's in right now after the Yom Kippur War, because everyone said, how could you not have known this? People tried to tell you, you missed it, there were signs. And so was Moshe Dayan. Moshe Dayan was the defense minister, and people said, you've missed this. After the Yom Kippur War, Golda Meir was reelected. However, then there was a commission, and the commission came out and said, this was her fault. And then she had to resign. So what will happen is, after the war, there'll be a commission, there'll be an investigation, probably led by a Supreme Court justice or something like that, someone really authoritative. And they'll say, okay, here's what happened. And based on that, the Israelis will have to make a decision on who they want to be the next prime minister. But as of right now, as of the surveys, the polls that came out yesterday, if there was an election today, Benny Gantz would win. And Benny Gantz would have enough between his party and Yair Lapid's party and Avigdor Lieberman's party. They would have more than 60 to make a coalition. And most Likud supporters are furious at Netanyahu, especially in the South. I mean, the South are obviously just distraught and are furious with him. And no matter what, look, he's in an impossible position, because they're demanding that he returns the hostages. Well, what can he do? I mean, if he returns the hostages, then you've got to give up on the war. And if you give up on the war, everyone else is saying you can't give up on the war. So he's in an impossible situation. It's easy for me sitting here, to say this was all Bibi's fault, but I'm waiting for the commission to come out and tell me what really happened. That being said, I think he definitely bears a lot of responsibility for the judicial nonsense and separating the country and weakening the country. And everyone in Israel should have seen that though we disagree on this, we cannot have a tear in society. We cannot have people not going to the reserves. We cannot have Air Force pilots who are rusty because they're protesting at home. That can never happen, and all Israelis need to answer for that. Not to us, they don't have to answer anything for us, but to themselves. There's going to be a reckoning. But they have to make sure that no matter what happens politically, that the army is on top of things. And that means that the reserves have to be showing up for, and they learned that in a very, very painful way. So, look, even Netanyahu finally admitted he's going to have to answer questions about this. But, for me to be able to say, here's what happened, I don't know yet. I don't know.
I have two questions. One is, maybe you could talk a little bit about the tunnels and about the hostages and about the fact that they came out of the tunnels the other day to try to go into Israel and scuba equipment, and they were shot, a bunch of Hamas members.
Oh, yeah.
And then how you think that's going to impact, you probably can't answer this, but, I mean, the hostages are probably in those tunnels that she says is like a spider web, and we've known that for a long time.
Right. I mean, it's really intricate underneath. Thus far, Israel has not been able to find them. They don't know. Well, look, for whatever reason, when they make tough decisions in the army level and the Mossad level, they don't call me. They don't.
They should.
It's
They have all the answers.
It's a mistake. It's a mistake. It's probably what, I mean, they know I wrote this book. But what they're saying is, we don't know where the hostages are. What Hamas is saying is 50 of them have been killed in the bombing. Now, that's possible, because Israel's bombing the heck out of everything. It's also possible that Hamas killed them, or put them in buildings where they knew they would be killed, because it benefits Hamas to say, look how you're killing your own people. So you have to understand, these are not humanitarians. These are Nazis. So the way that they're being... But Israel doesn't know. Now, what Israel did yesterday, over the last couple of days, it started dropping leaflets in Gaza saying, if you have any information, let us know. We'll give you money. We'll give you a house. We'll give you a safe passage. You can go live in Dubai, in a penthouse somewhere. We'll set you up. Just tell us where the hostages are. I don't think that's gotten... Maybe someone will. There's a QR code on the leaflets, and you go on the QR code and you can write, "Dear Mossad." They're at, one, they have them all at 12, Kill the Jews Street,
But how come over time, when always the reporting was that they were getting rid of the tunnels, and Israel has successfully got rid of a portion of the tunnels, they just keep rebuilding?
Well, so-
Israel will laugh.
They never get rid of the tunnels. They get rid of the tunnels coming out. They never get rid of the tunnels underneath the buildings in Gaza, and if they do, they rebuild them. All the billions of dollars. If you look at Gaza, it's a dump. It's horrible. Because all the billions of dollars that are supposed to build the buildings, supposed to build the schools, supposed to build the hospitals, supposed to build everything, goes to building terror infrastructure underground. So they've got a first-class terror infrastructure underground. They've got tons of fuel, they got tons of generators, they got tons of food. They have it great under there. Everyone who lives on top has nothing, because Hamas steals every penny, and there's billions of dollars coming in from the Arab world all the time, but it all goes to terrorist infrastructure. So they've got the Ritz-Carlton of underground terrorist infrastructures. It's really good. There's no way Israel... So Israel's going in every night on these little, mini raids, and they're trying to find out what they can, but it's too deep. And so the only way they're really going to get in there is a ground offensive. So they've halted the ground offensive for a few reasons. First of all, there was some really bad weather. Second of all, they weren't sure if they were ready. Third of all, there was, the reason why they let 2 hostages out and 2 more hostages out was to give hope that there could be hostage negotiations. Hamas isn't going to let them all out, but to give a little bit of hope that maybe they would, to delay the ground offensive. And maybe get to the point where the world says, Israel, you can't do the ground offensive. But I have to tell you, when Joe Biden came out the other day and said, we're not going back to the status quo, and Israel still has work to do and they need to do it, and Hamas needs to be destroyed, that was a game changer. That was a game changer. It was a game changer. So, good questions. Yeah.
Is there an impact of the news cycle? Like, all of a sudden last night they're reporting on the mass shooting, but they're reporting it from Tel Aviv.
Right.
When all of this attention in our country has shifted.
Right.
Or even back and forth. Is there an impact?
Yes. Listen, what's happening on the college campuses, the longer the war drags on, the more it'll blow over. Who's talking about Ukraine anymore? People are being slaughtered by the Russians in Ukraine every day. People are being killed, maimed, raped, horrible things in Ukraine, just like they were a few months ago. Nobody cares. I mean, people care, but what are you going to do? And if you see a Ukraine story on the news, change the channel. And it's horrible what happened in Maine. But the speaker thing, every time the news about the speakers on TV, I'm like, yes, talk about that. Talk about anything but Israel. Because once it's out of sight and out of mind, all the stuff on the college campuses will die down. Now, the ground offensive is going to... But you have to understand, news cycles always blow over. They always blow over. And eventually this war will end, and a lot of this anti-Semitism that's sprung up will go away. Now, those Arabs at Tulane, they're not go to Tulane, but those Arabs who are driving around Tulane and the ones in New York and Harvard or wherever, they'll still hate Israel. But you won't hear about it. It won't be on TikTok. It won't be on... The other thing that's really important, something happened at a local school. So I was talking to the administrators there. I said, one student had really pro-Palestinian feelings, and the administration at this school came out really in favor of Israel. And they put an Israeli flag up in their building.
In Miami?
In Miami. And one student was offended by it. He's not Muslim, but he's offended by it. So someone at the school talked to him. I can't say which school or who it was. Maybe you heard about it. But someone at the school talked to him, and the things he was saying, how could Israel bomb that hospital? So he said, well, where does this kid get his news? TikTok.
Along with a lot of other kids.
Right. So kids today...
All the 20-year-olds, including and Twitter, they get all their news on Twitter.
But
Right.
Rabbi,
Wait, hang on a second.
don't you think
So let me just answer that question. I'm just waiting for them. I was hoping if I stopped talking, they would stop talking, but it didn't work. Kids today get their news from Instagram and TikTok. And on Instagram and TikTok, every single thing on there is biased one way or the other. There's no unbiased. Everyone goes on TikTok for the point of saying your opinion. So here's this kid who goes to this school, who's listening and says, look what Israel did to this hospital. Look at these kids bleeding. And he comes to school and says, why'd I have an Israel flag in my school? Look what they're doing. And so what I'm trying to convince administrators is they have to teach their kids, you've got to listen to real news outlets. I mean, not that they're that great either, but there are a lot. And I will say this, one last point. People, anytime someone at Beth Am sees something, of the 5,000 people who sees at Beth Am, anytime any one of them hears something on MSNBC or NPR, National Palestinian Radio, or BBC or whatever, CNN, whatever, they immediately send it to me. Look at these anti-Semites. So I get hundreds a day. You don't need to forward me anything. I know it. But you can. It's fine. I got nothing else to do. But you have to understand, there are hosts of these shows. Some of them are biased against Israel. Some of them are biased for Israel. And their goal somewhat is to show parity. I would argue, from what I've seen, you could disagree with this, and I don't care, but you could. I would argue that CNN, for the most part, has been pretty good.
Yes, but why do they want to show the other side?
Right, and well,
Why are they giving the coverage?
because they want to look unbiased. And I think MSNBC,
They're very busy pulling babies out of
NBC, with the exception of their Arab hosts, who've been a disgrace, has been pretty good.
Which one?
They have 3 or 4 hosts who are Arab, and they're Mehdi something, and they're so MSNBC. They're so biased. Terrible. But Lawrence O'Donnell's been very good. Rachel Maddow's been pretty good. Some of them have been fine.
I have a question.
Oh, he's terrible. Oh, I didn't know that. He's an anti-Semite. There's no question. Well, he hates her though.
I have a question for anti-Semitism.
Okay.
It's an antiquated word, and it doesn't really reflect only anti-Jew. If you look up the definition of anti-Semitism, it includes Islam, it includes a lot of other things. I think it needs to be anti-Judaism, anti-Jewish. Like, I really
Yeah.
do. Because if you look, the word is not, it's not Arab, it's like a whole bunch of different things. Obviously, it's always used for anti-Judaism. But I think that we really need to change that because it's not, I
Yeah.
don't think it's even effective enough.
Do you know in Israel, there are a couple ways that they have to talk about things. In Israel, they won't say the West Bank. Nobody says the West Bank in Israel. They say Judea and Samaria. We're not calling this the West Bank of the Jordan River. This is the land that we live in, Judea and Samaria. I once saw an interview with Netanyahu in the old days when he was like the greatest statesman. And the interviewer was saying, how can you take this land, the West Bank? How can you take this as Jewish land? And he goes, you know what the names of this place is? Judea and Samaria. Judea. How can we take Judea? We founded it. We've been here for 3,800 years. If we shouldn't live in Judea, where should we live? Other people are starting to say that. I mean, I know anti-Semitism means you hate Jews, but people are starting to talk about that. And I was at an event the other night, and this lady told it to me 7 times, and I said, "Listen, I'm with you." But
So my question, as far as media goes, don't you think the New York Times has overplayed, without corroborating, the bombing of the hospital, and they got their news from Hamas?
They admitted it, though.
Yes, they admitted it like 5 days later, after it went viral, after the first.
They're still saying they don't have enough proof. They had proof. They had proof in 5 seconds to condemn Israel for the bombing that didn't even happen. But then they need all kinds of
I
proof
think
to say
all of
that
these
it wasn't-
protest marches and all these rallies happened right after that headline went out. And I think they are,
You've not seen another headline.
Yeah, but
since
CNN
then.
had
That's
it
what
too. They all had it. CNN had the same headline.
Good luck, Laura. Good luck. Well, I would just say this. I have not read an article in the New York Times in 30 years, and I don't plan on doing it. It's garbage. Yeah.
The other night, there were speakers here, Gil Hoffman, who some of us saw on the mission, and Jackie Alexander from Honest Reporting.
Yeah.
If you're not following them, follow them, because they were fantastic, and they said all the things we're saying. It's a watchdog, you know, when you see something like that, what we really need to do is get the person on the ground. They said something like 2,500 permits were issued in the last 3 weeks for journalists in Gaza. These are uneducated people who don't know what they're talking about, and that's where the New York Times is getting their news
Right.
from.
They
So,
said it. They relied on.
yes, so they were great the other night. They were great.
Nobody has pro-Israel programming like Temple Beth Am.
Just curious, what's going on college campuses? How many of the kids that are protesting are American citizens versus here on like F1 visas?
So, look, a lot more. I actually just I made a video this morning that were emailed out to the congregation talking about a lot of things, but one of them is if you have a college kid who's having a hard time, tell them to call me so that we can talk and we can offer them support and guidance and so forth. But I talked to one of our students who's at Penn last week. And I asked him, is this, because Penn had some real bad stuff. So I said to him, is this all Muslim? He says, no, it's not. There are Muslims, it's the Muslim groups, but it's also a lot of these woke, whatever, left-wing group. So I will tell you this. I think, this is going to sound radical, but, someone once asked me, you may not agree with this, and that's fine, but whenever I talk, you always have the right to be wrong. You always can be wrong. So, if you disagree with me. Some of this is meant to be fun. It wouldn't kill you, right, to smile once in a while. So someone once asked me, is Temple Beth Am for everyone? For every Jew? And I said, well, no. Because we can't accommodate the Orthodox. We have female rabbis. We have female cantor. That automatically makes Orthodox uncomfortable here. We're not kosher to their standards. Men and women sit together. We can't accommodate Orthodoxy here. But if you're conservative, if you're Reform, if you're Reconstruction, if you're anything else. So we said, well, are all of those Jews? Is Beth Am for all of those Jews? And we said, no. If you're not Zionist, we don't want you. If you're against Israel, this isn't the temple for you. We don't want you. And so if someone would come here and say, I want to rally against Israel, my feeling of that is, like I would say, for example, there was this guy, Bernie Goldstone, who made this report against Israel for the UN many years ago, and he was Jewish. And he was the one who led the report against Israel. And he was basically excommunicated. And people said, if he's not welcome in our synagogue. And I think people like Bernie Sanders should be excommunicated. I would say, if someone would say Bernie Sanders, who's come out against Israel all the time, who hates Israel,
lived in Israel.
yeah, he didn't learn much.
Well, he might not like being Jewish.
I would say this Jew is against Israel. How can you support Israel when even Jews? I would say he's not Jewish. We got rid of him. Yeah. But so look, I preface that. You may be. Hang on one sec. I preface that with you might not agree, but I'm just telling you what I think. You don't have to agree. Yeah.
Where does the J Street stand right now? Because I didn't hear any of the leaders say.
Okay, so no, J Street put out a statement, and so in June, I went to Israel with 11 other rabbis, and really the 12 rabbis who AIPAC felt were their biggest, staunchest supporters of synagogues that they felt mattered, which means where they could get your money. And we went to, so we have now this WhatsApp group of these rabbis, and someone put the J Street statement on there. And they condemned Hamas as, kmo shetzarich, as you would hope. And they said that anyone who supports the Palestinians, right now in Hamas, that they're going to take away their support for them. And it was, if you just read that statement from J Street, you would say, it's pretty good. So my reaction to that was, that's great. Over the last 20 years, you've supported candidates who don't support Iron Dome. You've done everything you can to endanger Israel. And anything you say right now, from my perspective, you can disagree. From my perspective, no matter what you say now, it's too little too late. You've endangered Israel. And I'll always stand against them no matter what, because they endanger Israel.
Rabbi, what's the behind-the-scenes conversation of where the United States is coming into play? Obviously, I know you don't have a phone call right to our military, but there has to be talk amongst clergy and overseas. Like, what is our role going to be, in your opinion, more than just financial support and weapons support? Or how deep do you think we'll be getting involved?
American Jews?
Just America in general.
Oh, so listen, you have to understand. First of all, Biden has been a staunch supporter of Israel, and people weren't sure, and he's been great. There are real problems because his polling is going down among younger Democrats, because younger Democrats don't support Israel in mass numbers, and so his polling is going down. So as he sees his polling going down, and as other Democrats enter into the field, they're going to say, well, supporting Israel is going to cost me votes. That's my biggest fear. That's why AIPAC is so important. AIPAC is so important to get to these congressmen and anyone who wants to move up and become, president someday, that we develop a relationship with them right away. And I can't tell you my revulsion. I couldn't say that. By the way, if I say this stuff in most Reform congregations, they'd probably get rid of me. This happens to be a congregation that likes Israel. But there are a lot of Reform congregations that they don't tolerate these kind of views. I wouldn't want to work there anyway. But what was I just saying? I lost my mind. Oh, so my revulsion at other rabbis who for the last 25 years, while we've been working so hard and schlepping to Washington 3 times a year and cultivating relationships with a different congressman or congresswoman every 2 years, and they haven't been doing a damn thing, and they've been criticizing AIPAC, and they've been supporting J Street. And now this happens, and they tell us we need to support Israel? Where the hell were you the last 25 years when we've been fighting for Israel's security? And now, all of a sudden, I'm really angry about it. I'm really, really angry about it.
Do you think any of the Jews are moving more right as far as politically?
I think what happened is this. This is a really good question. Jews became, over the last 25 years, way too comfortable. Way too comfortable. And we took Israel's safety for granted, and we supported candidates on other issues before Israel's safety. Because, and I think it's to some extent, I don't malign people for that, because if you would have asked me on October 6th, could something like this ever happen? I would have said, of course not. Have you seen Israel's military? We've all been to the Gaza border a million times. I mean, you saw the bases there. You see all the cameras. You see all the tanks. How could a bunch of idiot Hamas people on paragliders, they would just shoot them out of the sky? So I would have told you too. No, this could never happen. What was I more scared of? Hezbollah in the north. That could happen. Now, but to answer your question more about America, you have to understand, Biden bringing the carriers into the Middle East is 100%, well, it's mostly to protect Israel. However, America has other interests beyond Israel, because if Iran gets involved, if China gets involved, if Russia gets involved, well then Western Europe gets involved, and there are many more actors at play. So even if America hated Israel, They have to like Israel. Why? Because they're only ally in the region. So I heard one of these, I was watching one of the TikToks to see what the Palestinian side was saying. And this Palestinian guy, pro-Palestinian guy was saying, the only reason America likes Israel is because America wants to have a white foothold democracy in the Middle East, and that's why America has always supported Israel. And that's why Western Europe has always supported Israel. If that's true, if it was only to have a white Christian, Judeo-Christian foothold in the Middle East, why'd the British leave? They already had it. They were already in control of it. But they left because they didn't want that. So why are the Americans there supporting Israel? Because Israel's a democracy and because Israel shares their values. And that's what Harry Truman recognized, and that's where the relationship started. And we've been building on that ever since. So even if America hated Israel, I wouldn't say America needs Israel, but it kind of needs Israel because they're a base in the Middle East against the forces of evil, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, mainly Iran. So America has to stay, America can't disengage from Israel because it has much broader consequences.
You think this could possibly be a world?
So sorry, gotta go.
Oh, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I think that if Biden didn't send